The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday in March. Senior Marketing Manager at Davidson Technologies. $68,000 a year plus benefits. I'd applied 3 months earlier, made it through 4 rounds of interviews, and finally landed the job I'd been working toward since graduation. I called my mom, called my best friend, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. This was it. The moment everything I'd worked for was about to pay off. My first day was April 15th. I showed up at 8:30 a.m., wearing the navy suit I'd bought specifically for this job, carrying a leather portfolio my sister gave me for luck. HR walked me through orientation, handed me my security badge, showed me to my desk on the 3rd floor. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle, exposed brick walls, those expensive ergonomic chairs everyone talks about. I felt like I'd finally made it. At 10 a.m., they called a team meeting to introduce me to my new boss. The VP of Marketing had just been promoted to Chief Revenue Officer, and they'd brought in someone external to fill her role. I walked into the conference room with my notebook and coffee, sat down at the long table, waited. And then he walked in, Tyler Morrison, 6 feet tall, dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent. He looked older than I remembered, more polished, but it was definitely him. The guy I'd dated for 6 months, my junior year at University of Washington. The relationship that ended with him screaming at me in a parking lot after I broke up with him because he'd gotten too controlling, too jealous, too intense. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. And now, he was my boss. Our eyes met across the conference room. I watched recognition flicker across his face. Then he smiled. That same smile he used to give me when he thought he was being charming. He introduced himself to the team, talked about his vision for the department, made jokes that got polite laughs, never once acknowledged that we knew each other. When the meeting ended, everyone filed out. I tried to follow. He said, "Sarah, can you stay back for a minute? I need to go over some things with you." My stomach dropped. I sat back down. He closed the door, came around and sat on the edge of the table right next to me. "Too close, way too close," he said. "Well, this is unexpected." I didn't respond. He said, "I didn't know you worked here when I took the job." "Interesting coincidence." I said, "I'd like to keep our past relationship separate from our professional relationship." He laughed, said, "Of course. We're both adults here. This doesn't have to be weird. But I have to say, you look even better than you did in college." I felt my face go hot. I stood up, said I needed to get back to my desk. He said, "Sure thing. We'll talk soon." That's when I knew this was going to be a problem. That's when I should have gone to HR. But I didn't. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just an awkward comment, and he'd keep things professional going forward. I'd worked too hard to get this job. I wasn't going to let some uncomfortable history mess it up. I was so wrong. The comment started 3 days later. Small things at first. He'd stop by my desk and say, "That dress looks great on you," or, "You should wear your hair down more often." Things that could maybe be passed off as friendly but felt wrong coming from him. Coming from my boss. I'd smile tightly and get back to work. But he'd linger. Ask questions about projects that didn't need his input. Find reasons to touch my shoulder or lean over my desk to look at my computer screen. Within 2 weeks, the emails started. He'd send messages at 11 p.m., midnight, 1 in the morning, sometimes about work, sometimes just casual conversation. "How are you settling in? Do you remember that Italian place we used to go to? I've been thinking about those days." I stopped responding to the late-night ones. That's when he started calling me into his office. His office had glass walls, but he'd close the blinds. Say he needed privacy for sensitive conversations. Then he'd sit me down and critique my work, tell me I wasn't meeting expectations, that I needed to be more of a team player, more flexible. He'd use phrases like, "I know you're capable of more than this, Sarah. You used to be so driven." What happened? I'd leave those meetings shaking, questioning everything. Was I actually underperforming? Or was this about something else entirely? By week 6, I knew exactly what this was. This was retaliation. This was punishment for breaking up with him 5 years ago. This was a man with power using that power to hurt someone who'd rejected him. And I realized with absolute clarity that if I didn't document every single thing that happened, I was going to lose this job. Or worse, my entire career. I'm 30 years old. I've worked in marketing for 8 years. I put myself through college, working 3 part-time jobs. I graduated with honors, built my resume from nothing, learned to navigate office politics, toxic bosses, impossible deadlines. But I'd never dealt with anything like this. Never had someone weaponize a past relationship to destroy my professional life. I felt powerless, trapped, terrified of losing everything I'd worked for. So I started recording. Everything. I bought a small digital voice recorder online, the kind that looks like a pen. I kept it in my pocket during every interaction with Tyler. Every time he called me into his office, I'd hit record before walking in. Every time he stopped by my desk, I'd make sure it was running. I documented dates, times, what was said. I saved every email he sent, every text message. I started keeping a detailed log in a password-protected document on my personal laptop. What he said, what I said, who else was around, how it made me feel. The first recording I got was 10 days after I started documenting. He called me into his office at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Everyone else had left for the weekend. He closed the blinds, sat down on the edge of his desk right in front of where I was sitting. The recorder was running in my blazer pocket. He said, "You know, Sarah, I think we need to clear the air about something. About us." I said, "There is no us. We dated briefly in college. That was 5 years ago." He said, "Come on. It was more than that. We were good together. You remember how good we were together." My hands were clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. I said, "I'm here to talk about work. If there's nothing work-related to discuss, I'd like to go home." He stood up, walked around behind my chair, put his hands on the back of it. I could feel him right behind me. He said, "You're always so tense now. You never used to be this uptight. Maybe if you relaxed a little, your performance would improve. Maybe if you were more friendly, I could help you out more. You know, like we used to help each other out." I stood up so fast the chair rolled backward and hit his legs. I said, "I need to leave." He said, "See, this is what I'm talking about. You can't handle feedback. You get defensive. That's why your numbers are down. That's why the team is starting to question if you're the right fit." I walked out, got to my car, sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes trying to stop shaking. Then I went home and listened to the recording 3 times. His voice saying those words. The implications so clear it made me sick. I saved it with the date and a detailed description of what happened before and after. That was recording number 1. Over the next 5 months, I collected 47 more. Recording number 8 was him telling me that if I wanted to get ahead in this company, I needed to be more accommodating. That successful women knew how to make their bosses happy. Recording number 15 was him blocking my promotion to senior manager because, as he put it in an email I saved, I wasn't demonstrating the leadership qualities the role required. Recording number 23 was him tanking my quarterly performance review with false claims about missed deadlines and poor quality work. My actual projects had exceeded every metric. My teammates would have backed that up, but Tyler was my direct supervisor. His word was what mattered. Recording number 31 was him cornering me in the break room at 7:30 in the evening. Everyone else had gone home. He stood between me and the door, said, "You know what your problem is? You think you're too good for this, too good for me. You thought that in college and you still think it now, but you're not. You're just another employee who needs to remember who signs off on her paycheck." I said move. He didn't. I had to squeeze past him to get out. The recorder caught every word. By month 4, I was barely sleeping. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a panic, thinking about work, about what Tyler might do next, about whether I should quit. But I couldn't quit. I had student loans, rent. My mom was dealing with medical bills and I was helping her. I needed this job. I needed the salary. And more than that, I was furious. Furious that this man could walk into my workplace and destroy everything I'd built just because I'd broken up with him half a decade ago. Furious that the system seemed designed to protect men like him and punish women like me who tried to fight back. So I kept recording, kept documenting, kept showing up every day and doing exceptional work despite everything. I made sure my projects were flawless, made sure every email I sent was professional and well documented, made sure I had witnesses for as many interactions as possible. I was building a case. I just didn't know if anyone would listen. Then, in month 5, something shifted. I was having coffee with Amy Chen, one of the other marketing managers. We'd become friendly. She was telling me about her previous job and mentioned she'd left because of a toxic boss. I asked what happened. She hesitated, then said, "This stays between us, right?" I nodded. She said, "My boss at my last company started hitting on me. I turned him down. He made my life hell until I quit. His name was Tyler Morrison. Now he's running some marketing department in Seattle." My blood went cold. I said, "Tyler Morrison is my boss. Right now, at this company." She stared at me, said, "No. No way. They hired him?" I thought he was blacklisted. I asked what she meant. She said there had been complaints at her company, multiple women. HR had opened an investigation, but Tyler left before it was completed, took a job somewhere else. She'd heard rumors he'd done the same thing at the company before that. Just kept moving, kept getting hired, kept harassing women and leaving before facing consequences. That night I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Amy had told me. Tyler had a pattern. This wasn't just about me and our past relationship. This was what he did. He was a predator who used his position to target women and then moved on before getting caught. And Davidson Technologies had hired him without apparently doing any real background check, had promoted him to VP, had given him power over an entire department of people. I spent the weekend researching, found his LinkedIn profile, looked at his work history. 3 companies in 7 years. That alone was a red flag. I searched for news articles, found nothing public, but I did find professional forums where people discussed workplace issues anonymously, found 3 separate posts that matched his timeline and described behavior exactly like what I was experiencing. Women who said they'd been harassed by a marketing VP who moved companies frequently. Women who said they'd tried to report him and been ignored or pressured to stay quiet. On Monday morning, I made a decision. I was going to blow this whole thing open. Not just report the harassment. Report everything. The pattern. The previous complaints. The fact that our company had hired someone who was likely fleeing an investigation. I was going to make sure Tyler Morrison never did this to anyone else ever again. But I needed leverage. I needed something that would make the company listen. Make them take action instead of trying to protect themselves and sweep everything under the rug. So I kept recording. Kept documenting. And I started digging into Tyler's background more carefully. His resume claimed he had an MBA from Northwestern University. I called their registrar's office, pretending to be verifying employment credentials. They had no record of him. His resume claimed he'd increased revenue by 40% at his previous company. I found their public earnings reports. Revenue had actually declined during his tenure. Tyler Morrison had lied on his resume, had fabricated credentials to get hired. And nobody had checked. Nobody had verified. They'd just taken his word for it and given him a 6-figure salary and control over 30 employees. I now had 47 recordings of harassment and retaliation, emails and text messages that showed a clear pattern, testimony from another woman he'd victimized, evidence that he'd lied to get his job, and knowledge that he was likely under investigation at his previous company. It was time to act. On a Thursday morning in September, I requested a meeting with James Patterson, the chief revenue officer, Tyler's boss, the person who'd hired him. I said it was urgent. James's assistant scheduled me for 2 p.m. that afternoon. I spent the morning making copies of everything, organizing the recordings into a timeline, printing out the emails, preparing a 10-page document that laid out the entire case in clear chronological order. I put it all in a manila folder. And at 1:55 p.m., I walked into James Patterson's office. He was in his early 50s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of executive who'd been at Davidson Technologies for 20 years and probably thought he'd seen everything. He gestured for me to sit, asked what this was about. I said, I need to report Tyler Morrison for sexual harassment, retaliation, and fraud. Then I handed him the folder. He opened it, started reading. His expression changed from polite interest to concern to something close to panic. He looked up at me and said, "You recorded him?" I said yes. Washington is a one-party consent state. I'm legally allowed to record conversations I'm part of. He went back to reading. I watched him go through page after page. Listen to excerpts of the recordings on my phone. Read the emails. See the timeline of how my performance reviews and promotion opportunities tanked after I refused Tyler's advances. When he finished, he was pale. He said, "I need to bring in legal." I said, "I expected you would." An hour later, I was sitting in a conference room with James, 2 corporate attorneys, and the head of HR. They asked me to walk through everything again. I did. They asked if anyone else had experienced similar treatment. I told them about Amy Chen. Told them about the investigation at Tyler's previous company. Told them about the fake credentials. One of the attorneys asked if I'd be willing to make a formal statement. I said yes. She asked if I'd considered filing a lawsuit. I said I was more interested in making sure Tyler never did this to anyone else, but if that required legal action, I was prepared to take it. They exchanged looks. The kind of looks that told me they were calculating costs, calculating risk, calculating how much this was going to cost the company if it went public. James said, "We take these allegations very seriously. We'll launch an immediate investigation. Tyler will be placed on administrative leave effective immediately." I said, "You need to contact his previous employers. You need to verify his credentials. You need to find out how many other women he's done this to." The HR director was taking notes. She said, "We'll begin that process today." They asked me to take the rest of the week off, paid leave. Said they'd be in touch. I left the office and sat in my car and cried for the first time in months. Not because I was sad, because I was relieved. Because I'd done it. I'd reported everything. I'd handed over the evidence. And now it was out of my hands. The investigation took 3 weeks. In that time, I learned things that made me both furious and vindicated. Tyler Morrison didn't have an MBA from Northwestern. He'd never attended Northwestern at all. He had a bachelor's degree from a state school and had fabricated everything else. The revenue numbers he'd claimed were complete fiction. At his previous company, he'd been under investigation for harassment of 4 different women. He'd resigned before the investigation concluded and convinced Davidson Technologies to hire him by claiming he was leaving for a better opportunity. They'd never called his previous employer. Never verified anything. Just trusted him. Davidson's legal team contacted his 2 previous employers. Found evidence of complaints at both. Found at least 8 women total who'd experienced some form of harassment or retaliation from Tyler Morrison over 7 years. Found that he had a pattern of targeting younger women in entry or mid-level positions. Women who didn't have power. Women who needed their jobs. Women he thought wouldn't fight back. On October 5th, Tyler Morrison was fired for cause. Fraud and gross misconduct. His employment was terminated immediately, and he was banned from company property. The legal team sent letters to his previous employers, informing them of what they'd discovered. HR flagged his profile in background check databases. They were making sure he couldn't just move to another company and start over. And then the settlement discussions began. The company wanted this to stay quiet. Wanted me to sign an NDA. Not talk about what had happened. Not pursue legal action. In exchange, they were offering compensation. The first offer was $50,000. I said no. My attorney, who I'd hired at this point, said we should ask for $250,000. The company countered with $100,000. We countered with $500,000. They came back with $375,000. $375,000. More than 5 years of my current salary. Plus a guarantee of promotion to senior manager with a raise to $85,000 annually. Plus a transfer to a different department with a new supervisor. Plus a letter of recommendation. Plus coverage of all my legal fees. Plus a stipulation that Tyler Morrison could never work for any company affiliated with Davidson Technologies or its partners. I took the deal, not because I wanted to stay quiet, but because I wanted to move forward. I wanted to rebuild my career without this hanging over me. I wanted financial security so I could help my mom and pay off my loans and never feel trapped in a job again. And honestly, I wanted Tyler to face consequences. And he had. He'd lost his job, his reputation, his ability to keep doing this to other women. That felt like enough. Amy Chen left her company and came to work at Davidson. We're friends now. Real friends. She's in a different department, but we have lunch every week. Talk about our lives. About how we survived. About the ways the system is broken and how we're trying to fix it from the inside. 3 other women from Tyler's previous companies reached out to me after hearing what happened. We've stayed in touch. Built a support network. Made sure we're not alone in this. It's been 11 months since I walked into James Patterson's office with that folder. I'm now a senior marketing manager, making $85,000 a year. I lead a team of 6 people. My performance reviews are excellent. I've launched 3 successful campaigns. Won an industry award. I'm good at my job. I was always good at my job. But now I get to do it without someone sabotaging me at every turn. Tyler Morrison tried to find work after Davidson fired him, but the background checks kept coming back with flags. The professional network is smaller than people think. Word gets around. Last I heard, he left the marketing field entirely. I don't know what he's doing now. Don't care. He's not my problem anymore. People ask me sometimes if I regret not taking the case public, if I wish I'd sued instead of settling, if I think an NDA means the company won. And here's what I tell them. I recorded everything because I knew nobody would believe me otherwise. I documented everything because I knew the system was designed to protect men like Tyler and silence women like me. But I also knew that winning didn't mean destroying myself in the process. Winning meant getting justice on my terms, holding him accountable, making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else, and walking away with my career intact and my dignity preserved. That folder I handed James Patterson contained 6 months of evidence, 47 recordings, hundreds of emails, testimony from multiple women, proof of fraud. A pattern so clear that even corporate lawyers whose job is to protect the company couldn't ignore it. That folder was my power, and I used it to change everything. Some women inherit wealth by accident of birth. I earned mine through 6 months of hell and the courage to fight back with every legal tool I had. The view from my office window is spectacular today. I can see Mount Rainier in the distance, snow-capped and glowing in the afternoon sun. I've got a team meeting in an hour, dinner plans with Amy tonight, and a savings account that means I never have to feel trapped again. That's what winning looks like. Not perfect, not Hollywood, just real, just mine.